Emily stood before Robert's grave on a sunny day, her heart heavy with grief. The warmth of the sun did little to alleviate the sadness that enveloped her as she reflected on the life they had shared. Memories of their time together flooded her mind, the laughter, the challenges, and the love that had bound them for so many years. Emily traced her fingers over the engraved letters of Robert's name, feeling a deep ache in her chest. As she prepared to leave, Emily noticed a young girl standing silently in front of the tombstone. The girl's presence was unexpected, and Emily watched as she placed a small bouquet of flowers at the base of the grave. Curiosity mingled with Emily's sorrow as she observed the teenager's visible emotional state. Emily approached the girl, who seemed lost in her thoughts. "Excuse me," Emily said gently, not wanting to startle her. "Did you know Robert?" The girl turned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Yes, I did. My name is Aaliyah," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "Are you Mrs. Thompson?" Emily nodded, her curiosity growing. "I am. How did you know Robert?" Aaliyah took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Mr. Thompson, Robert, he helped me in ways I can never repay. He secretly paid for my school tuition." The revelation hit Emily like a thunderbolt. She stared at Aaliyah, trying to process this new information about her late husband. "He paid for your tuition? I had no idea," Emily stammered, her mind racing. Aaliyah nodded, a small smile forming on her lips despite her tears. "He was an incredible man. He believed in me when no one else did. Without his help, I wouldn't be able to continue my education." Emily's surprise gave way to a mix of emotions: pride in her husband's generosity, confusion about why he had kept it secret, and a tinge of hurt that he hadn't shared this part of his life with her. "How long had he been helping you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the past 2 years," Aaliyah replied. "He approached me after a school event where I spoke about my dreams of becoming a doctor. I was struggling to pay for school and he offered to help anonymously. He made me promise not to tell anyone." Emily's mind whirled with questions. Why had Robert kept this from her? Were there others he had helped? What else didn't she know about the man she thought she knew so well? "I'm sorry if this comes as a shock," Aaliyah said, noticing Emily's stunned expression. "I debated whether I should come here today, but I needed to pay my respects. Robert changed my life, and I'll be forever grateful." Emily took a moment to collect herself. "No, don't apologize. I'm glad you told me. It's just unexpected." She looked at Aaliyah with newfound interest, seeing her as a link to a side of Robert she never knew existed. Would you like to tell me more about how Robert helped you?" Aaliyah nodded, her eyes brightening slightly. "I'd like that very much, Mrs. Thompson." As they walked away from the grave, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions. The grief was still there, raw and painful, but now it was tinged with a sense of wonder and curiosity. She had come to the cemetery to mourn the husband she had lost, but now she realized there was still so much about Robert left to discover. Emily led Aaliyah to a nearby cafe, her mind still reeling from the revelation at the cemetery. They settled into a quiet corner booth, and Emily ordered coffee for herself and a hot chocolate for Aaliyah. "Tell me about yourself, Aaliyah," Emily said, her voice gentle but direct. "How did you meet Robert, and what are your aspirations?" Aaliyah took a sip of her hot chocolate before responding. "I'm 17 and a senior in high school. I've always dreamed of becoming a doctor, specifically a pediatrician. My parents, they work hard, but medical school seemed like an impossible goal." Emily nodded, encouraging her to continue. 2 years ago, I gave a speech at a school event about my aspirations. Afterward, Mr. Thompson approached me. He said he saw potential in me and wanted to help. At first, I was skeptical, but he was so kind and genuine. He offered to pay my tuition anonymously, no strings attached. Emily listened intently, picturing Robert in this role she had never known. "That sounds like Robert," she said softly. "Always seeing the best in people." Aaliyah's eyes lit up, He was amazing, Mrs. Thompson. He didn't just pay the bills. He mentored me, encouraged me when I doubted myself. He even helped me prepare for college applications. As Aaliyah shared more stories, Emily felt a mix of pride and sadness wash over her. Pride in the man Robert had been, and sadness that she hadn't known this side of him. "Did Robert help others like you?" Emily asked, her curiosity growing. Aaliyah nodded. "Yes, there were others. He was careful about keeping it secret, but I knew of at least 3 other students he was helping. One wants to be an engineer, another a teacher, and the third a social worker." Emily's eyes widened. "I had no idea," she murmured. "Robert never mentioned any of this." "He was adamant about keeping it private," Aaliyah explained. "He said he didn't want recognition or praise. He just wanted to make a difference." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. It was so like Robert to do something so generous without seeking credit. Yet she couldn't help but feel a twinge of hurt that he had kept this part of his life from her. "Mrs. Thompson," Aaliyah said, leaning forward, "I hope I haven't upset you by telling you all this. Mr. Thompson, Robert, he spoke of you often. He loved you deeply." Emily reached out and patted Aaliyah's hand. "No, dear, I'm grateful you told me. It's just a lot to process. But it makes me proud to know Robert was helping young people like you." As they continued talking, Emily found herself drawn into Aaliyah's world. The young woman's determination and gratitude were palpable. Emily could see why Robert had been inspired to help her. "What are your plans now?" Emily asked. "For college and beyond?" Aaliyah's face lit up. "I've been accepted to State University's pre-med program. It's a big step, but I'm determined to make it work. Mr. Thompson's support gave me the confidence to apply." Emily nodded, feeling a spark of something new amidst her grief, a desire to continue Robert's legacy of helping others. "I'm sure you'll do wonderfully," she said. "Robert clearly saw something special in you." As their conversation drew to a close, Emily felt a mix of emotions. The pain of losing Robert was still there, but now it was accompanied by a sense of purpose. She had discovered a new dimension to the man she had loved, and with it, a way to honor his memory. "Aaliyah," Emily said as they prepared to leave, "thank you for sharing this with me. I'd like to stay in touch if that's all right with you. I think Robert would have wanted that." Aaliyah smiled warmly. "I'd like that very much, Mrs. Thompson. And thank you for listening. It means a lot to be able to share how much Mr. Thompson meant to me." As they parted ways, Emily felt a small but significant shift in her grief. She recalled instances when Robert had faced criticism for his interactions with people from different backgrounds, revealing a strength of character she hadn't fully appreciated before. One memory stood out vividly. At a town council meeting 2 years ago, Robert had advocated for increased funding for the local community center, which primarily served minority and low-income families. Some council members, including the outspoken Mr. Thompson, had accused Robert of wasting taxpayer money on lost causes. Emily remembered how Robert had stood firm, his voice steady as he argued, "Every child deserves a chance to succeed. This isn't about wasting money. It's about investing in our community's future." At the time, Emily had been proud of Robert's stance, but now she realized it was part of a larger pattern of generosity she hadn't fully understood. As Emily pondered these memories, her phone rang. It was Aaliyah. "Mrs. Thompson," Aaliyah said, her voice excited, "I wanted to let you know about an event happening at school next month. We're honoring community members who have made a significant impact. I think Mr. Thompson should be recognized." Emily felt a mix of emotions at the suggestion. Pride in Robert's actions, certainly, but also a hint of trepidation about how the community might react. "That's a wonderful idea, Aaliyah," she said carefully. "But you know, not everyone in town saw Robert the way you did." Aaliyah's voice grew determined. "That's exactly why we should do this, Mrs. Thompson. People need to know the truth about Mr. Thompson's kindness. It might change how they see things." As they discussed the idea further, Emily's mind began to race. This event could be an opportunity to reveal Robert's secret acts of generosity, to change the narrative about him in the community. It was a chance to honor his legacy in a meaningful way. "All right," Emily said, making up her mind. "Let's do it. But we'll need to be careful about how we present this. Some people might be skeptical." Aaliyah's enthusiasm was palpable. "I can help gather statements from the other students Mr. Thompson helped, and maybe we could set up a scholarship in his name?" Emily nodded, even though Aaliyah couldn't see her. "That's a great idea. We could use some of the money Robert left to fund it." He would have liked that. As they continued to plan, Emily felt a sense of purpose growing within her. This event wasn't just about honoring Robert. It was about continuing his work, about showing the community the power of kindness and generosity. "Aaliyah," Emily said as their conversation wound down. "Thank you for suggesting this. I think it's exactly what Robert would have wanted." After hanging up, Emily sat in her living room, her mind whirling with plans and possibilities. She knew that not everyone would be receptive to this new image of Robert. Mr. Thompson, in particular, was likely to be a vocal opponent. But Emily felt a strength she hadn't experienced since Robert's passing. She was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. As she began to jot down ideas for the event, Emily glanced at a photo of Robert on the mantel. His kind eyes seemed to twinkle with approval. "We're not done yet, love," she whispered to the picture. "Your work is going to continue." With renewed energy, Emily threw herself into the preparations for the school event. She knew it wouldn't be easy to change long-held perceptions, but she was determined to try. Robert's legacy of quiet generosity deserved to be known and celebrated. And perhaps in the process, she could inspire others in the community to follow in his footsteps. Over the next few weeks, Emily immersed herself in organizing the event to honor Robert's legacy. She decided to establish a scholarship fund in his name, using a portion of their savings. Working closely with Aaliyah, Emily reached out to the school administration to arrange the details. "We'll call it the Robert Thompson Memorial Scholarship," Emily explained to the principal during a meeting. "It will cover full tuition for one deserving student each year who demonstrates academic excellence and a commitment to community service." The principal nodded approvingly. "That's a generous offer, Mrs. Thompson. It will make a real difference in a student's life." As they ironed out the logistics, Emily couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was a big step, one that would bring Robert's private acts of kindness into the public eye. Aaliyah proved to be an invaluable asset in the preparations. She helped coordinate with the other students Robert had assisted, gathering their stories and preparing them to speak at the event if they felt comfortable doing so. "Mrs. Thompson," Aaliyah said during one of their planning sessions, "I think we should invite the whole community to this. It's not just about the school. It's about changing how people saw Mr. Thompson." Emily agreed, though she couldn't shake her concerns about potential backlash. "You're right, Aaliyah, but we need to be prepared for some resistance. Not everyone will be happy about this." As they sent out invitations and put up flyers around town, Emily noticed the mixed reactions. Some people seemed genuinely interested, while others, particularly those who had been critical of Robert in the past, appeared skeptical or even hostile. One afternoon, while posting a flyer at the local grocery store, Emily overheard two women talking. "Can you believe this?" one said, gesturing to the flyer. "Robert Thompson, a community hero, what a joke." The other woman shrugged. "I don't know, Mary. My nephew says Thompson helped him stay in school when things got tough. Maybe there's more to the story." Emily walked away, her heart pounding. It was clear that changing people's minds wouldn't be easy, but conversations like this gave her hope. As the day of the event drew closer, Emily's nervousness grew. She spent hours preparing her speech, wanting to strike the right balance between honoring Robert's memory and challenging the community's preconceptions. The night before the event, Emily sat in her living room, reviewing her notes one last time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aaliyah. "Everything's ready for tomorrow. "We're going to do great, Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Thompson would be proud." Emily smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for the young woman who had become such an unexpected ally. She texted back, "Thank you, Aliyah, for everything." As she tried to sleep that night, Emily's mind raced with thoughts of the next day. Would people come? Would they listen? Would they understand why Robert had kept his generosity a secret? She tossed and turned, alternating between hope and anxiety. In the early hours of the morning, Emily finally drifted off, dreaming of Robert. In her dream, he smiled at her, his eyes twinkling with that familiar warmth. "You've got this, Em," Dream Robert said. "Just tell the truth. That's all that matters." Emily woke just as dawn was breaking, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in weeks. Whatever happened at the event, she knew she was doing the right thing. Robert's legacy of kindness deserved to be known, and she was ready to share it with the world. As she got dressed and prepared to head to the school, Emily took one last look at Robert's picture on the dresser. "Here we go, love," she whispered. "Let's show them who you really were." With a deep breath, she stepped out into the morning light, ready to face whatever the day might bring. The school auditorium buzzed with a mix of curiosity and skepticism as people filed in for the event. Emily stood backstage, her heart racing as she peered through the curtains. She saw familiar faces from the community, some friendly, others wearing expressions of doubt or even disdain. Aliyah approached, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mrs. Thompson, it's almost time. Are you ready?" Emily nodded, straightening her jacket. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this for Robert." As the principal introduced the event, Emily took deep breaths to calm her nerves. Finally, her name was called, and she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. "Good evening, everyone," Emily began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "We're here today to talk about a side of Robert Thompson that many of you may not have known." She paused, scanning the audience. Some leaned forward, intrigued, while others sat back with arms crossed. For years, Robert quietly helped students in our community pursue their dreams of higher education. He paid tuition, offered mentorship, and believed in young people when others had given up on them. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily pressed on, sharing stories that Aliyah and the other students had told her. She spoke of Robert's belief in the power of education to change lives, his desire to give back to the community he loved, and his insistence on keeping his generosity a secret. "Robert didn't do this for recognition," Emily explained, her voice growing stronger. "He did it because he believed in the potential of every young person in this town, regardless of their background or circumstances." As she spoke, Emily noticed a shift in the audience. The skeptical expressions began to soften, replaced by looks of surprise and, in some cases, shame. "I know some of you had your doubts about Robert," Emily continued. "I know there were rumors and criticisms, but I'm here to tell you that the man I knew, the man these students knew, was a person of extraordinary kindness and generosity." She introduced Aliyah, who took the stage to share her personal story of how Robert had changed her life. As Aliyah spoke, her voice clear and confident, Emily saw tears in the eyes of some audience members. "And now," Emily said, returning to the microphone, "we want to continue Robert's legacy. Today we're announcing the Robert Thompson Memorial Scholarship." She explained the details of the scholarship, emphasizing that it would be awarded based on both academic merit and community service. "We want to encourage the next generation to follow in Robert's footsteps, to give back to their community in whatever way they can." As Emily concluded her speech, the auditorium fell silent for a moment. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It started with a few claps here and there, but soon grew into a thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet, their faces showing a mix of emotions: respect, admiration, and for some, a sense of newfound understanding. Aliyah joined Emily on stage, both of them overwhelmed by the response. As the applause continued, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had done it. She had shared Robert's truth with the world. As the event wound down, people approached Emily, some with tears in their eyes, others eager to share their own stories of Robert's kindness that they had previously dismissed or forgotten. One elderly woman grasped Emily's hand. "I always wondered why Robert took such an interest in my grandson's education," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Now I understand. Thank you for sharing this with us." Emily smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. As she looked around the auditorium, she saw people talking animatedly, their perceptions visibly shifting. She knew there was still work to be done, minds to be changed, but this was a start. Robert's legacy was no longer a secret. It was alive, growing, and inspiring others. And as Emily stood there, surrounded by a community beginning to see her husband in a new light, she felt Robert's presence more strongly than ever before. As the event progressed and the atmosphere in the auditorium grew increasingly positive, Emily felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. However, her moment of triumph was short-lived. From the back of the room, a loud voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "This is all a bunch of lies!" The crowd parted to reveal Mr. Thompson, his face red with anger, striding down the center aisle. Emily tensed, recognizing Robert's long-time critic and one of the most vocal opponents of his community initiatives. "Mr. Thompson, please," Emily began, but he cut her off. "No, you listen here," he snarled, pointing an accusatory finger at her. "Robert Thompson was no saint. He was a meddler who wasted time and resources on lost causes. And now you're trying to rewrite history?" The room fell silent, all eyes darting between Emily and Mr. Thompson. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation she had feared but knew was inevitable. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice firm and clear, "I understand you had your differences with Robert, but what I've shared today is the truth." "Prove it," he challenged. "Where's your evidence? For all we know, you could have made up these stories to make your husband look good." Emily felt a moment of panic. She hadn't anticipated such a direct challenge. But before she could respond, Aaliyah stepped forward. "I have proof," Aaliyah said, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. She pulled out a folder from her bag. "These are copies of the tuition checks Mr. Thompson wrote for me and others. And here are the letters he sent us, encouraging us to pursue our dreams." Mr. Thompson scoffed. "Those could be fake." But Aaliyah wasn't finished. She turned to the audience. "Is Sarah Miller here? Or Jason Chen?" Two young people stood up hesitantly. "Tell them," Aaliyah urged. "Tell them how Mr. Thompson helped you." Sarah, a shy-looking girl, spoke up. "Mr. Thompson paid for my college application fees when my family couldn't afford them. He even drove me to my interviews." Jason nodded. "He tutored me in math every weekend for a year, never asking for anything in return." More voices joined in, each sharing a story of Robert's kindness and generosity. Emily watched in amazement as person after person stood up, adding their experiences to the growing testament of Robert's character. Mr. Thompson's face grew increasingly red as he realized he was losing ground. But he never told anyone about this. Why keep it a secret if he was such a do-gooder?" Emily stepped forward, feeling a new surge of confidence. "Because Robert didn't do these things for recognition or praise. He did them because he believed in the potential of every person in this community. He wanted to give people a chance without the burden of public scrutiny or expectations." She turned to address the entire room. "Robert wasn't perfect. He made mistakes like we all do, but he tried every day to make this community a better place, not through grand gestures but through small acts of kindness and belief in others." The room erupted in applause. Emily saw Mr. Thompson's shoulders slump as he realized his attack had backfired. The community that had once been skeptical of Robert was now rallying behind his memory. As Mr. Thompson skulked towards the exit, Emily felt a mix of emotions. She was elated that Robert's true nature had been revealed and accepted, But she also felt a twinge of sadness for Mr. Thompson. His bitterness had blinded him to the good in others. Aaliyah approached Emily, beaming. "We did it, Mrs. Thompson. We showed them who Mr. Thompson really was." Emily nodded, smiling through tears. "Yes, we did. And more importantly, we've inspired others to carry on his legacy." As the event wound down, Emily found herself surrounded by community members eager to share their own stories or express their newfound appreciation for Robert. She realized that this event wasn't just about clearing Robert's name. It was about bringing the community together and inspiring a new wave of kindness and generosity. The Robert Thompson Memorial Scholarship was no longer just a tribute to one man's legacy. It had become a symbol of hope and unity for the entire town. In the weeks following the event, Emily found herself at the center of a community transformation. The revelation of Robert's secret acts of kindness had sparked a wave of goodwill and inspired others to follow in his footsteps. Emily and Aaliyah began spending more time together, their shared experience at the event having forged a strong bond between them. One sunny afternoon, as they sat in Emily's garden, Aaliyah broached an idea. "Mrs. Thompson," she began, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, "I've been thinking, what if we could do more than just the scholarship? What if we could create a mentorship program for young people in our community?" Emily looked at Aaliyah, intrigued. "Go on," she encouraged. "Well, Mr. Thompson didn't just help us financially. He mentored us, believed in us. What if we could create a program where successful members of our community mentor students who need guidance and support?" Emily nodded, feeling a surge of excitement. "Aaliyah, that's a wonderful idea. It would be a perfect way to continue Robert's legacy." Over the next few days, they worked together to outline the program. They decided to call it the Robert Thompson Community Mentorship Program. The idea was to pair high school students with adult mentors who could offer guidance, support, and encouragement in pursuing their dreams. As they began to reach out to potential mentors and students, Emily was amazed by the positive response. People who had been inspired by Robert's story were eager to get involved. One evening, as Emily was sorting through applications for the program, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah Miller, one of the students who had spoken up at the event. "Mrs. Thompson, I just wanted to thank you again for sharing Mr. Thompson's story. It inspired me to volunteer at the local youth center. I'm helping kids with their homework, just like Mr. Thompson did for me." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest as she read the message. This was exactly what Robert would have wanted, his kindness rippling out and inspiring others to act. Over the next few weeks, similar messages began to pour in. A local business owner offered to provide internships for students in the mentorship program. The town council, once skeptical of Robert's community initiatives, voted to increase funding for youth programs. Emily found herself busier than she had been in years, coordinating mentors, organizing meetings, and speaking at community events. But it was a joyful kind of busy, filled with purpose and meaning. One day, as she was leaving a meeting at the high school, she ran into Mr. Thompson. There was an awkward moment as they faced each other, the memory of his outburst at the event hanging between them. To Emily's surprise, Mr. Thompson spoke first. "Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about Robert, and I was wrong to try to discredit what you were doing." Emily studied him for a moment, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate that." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking, is there any way I could help with this mentorship program of yours? I may have been wrong about a lot of things, but I do have experience in business that might be useful to some of the kids." Emily felt a smile spread across her face. This, she thought, was the true power of Robert's legacy, the ability to change hearts and bring people together. "We'd be glad to have your help, Mr. Thompson. Why don't you come to our next meeting?" As she walked away, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. Robert may have been gone, but his spirit lived on in the kindness and generosity spreading through their community. She looked up at the clear blue sky, imagining Robert smiling down on them all. "We're doing it, love," she whispered. "We're making a difference, just like you always did." And with that, she headed home, her heart full of hope for the future they were building together, a future inspired by one man's quiet acts of kindness. A month after the launch of the Robert Thompson Community Mentorship Program, Emily found herself sorting through old papers in Robert's study. The room still held his presence, the faint scent of his aftershave, the organized chaos of his bookshelves. As she sifted through a stack of documents, a weathered envelope caught her eye. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized Robert's handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and unfolded a letter dated several years back. Robert's letter. "Dear Emily, if you're reading this, it means I've never found the right moment to share these thoughts with you in person. I've always struggled to put into words why I feel so compelled to help others in our community, especially the young ones with big dreams but limited resources. Growing up, I was that kid, full of aspirations but facing a world that seemed stacked against me. It was Mr. Jenkins, my high school teacher, who saw something in me and went out of his way to mentor me, to help me believe in myself. His kindness changed the course of my life. I've never told you this, but I've made it my mission to pay forward what Mr. Jenkins did for me. Every time I help a student with their tuition or offer guidance, I'm honoring his legacy. I know you might not understand why I keep this part of my life separate, but I believe that true generosity should be its own reward. My dream is to see our community thrive, to watch young people reach their full potential regardless of their circumstances. I hope that one day this ripple effect of kindness will transform our town into a place where everyone looks out for each other. I love you, Emily. Thank you for always supporting me, even when you don't fully understand my actions. Your love gives me the strength to keep trying to make a difference. Always yours." Emily sat back in Robert's chair, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed the contents of the letter. It was as if Robert was speaking to her directly, explaining the motivations behind his secret acts of kindness. She reached for her phone and dialed Aliyah's number. "Aliyah," she said when the young woman answered, "I've found something I think you should see. Can you come over?" An hour later, Aliyah arrived at Emily's house. Emily handed her the letter, watching as Aliyah's eyes widened while reading Robert's words. "Mrs. Thompson," Aliyah said, her voice filled with emotion. "This is amazing. It explains so much about why Mr. Thompson did what he did." Emily nodded, a bittersweet smile on her face. "It does, and I think we need to share this with the community. It might inspire even more people to get involved." As they discussed how to share Robert's letter, Aliyah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and gasped. "Mrs. Thompson, you won't believe this. I just got an email from Jason Chen. He says he found an old notebook of Mr. Thompson's in his belongings. Apparently, Mr. Thompson used to keep a journal about the students he helped." Emily felt a surge of excitement. "A journal? Aliyah, this could be invaluable for our program. It might contain insights on mentoring that we could use." They agreed to meet Jason the next day to look at the journal. When they did, they found a treasure trove of information. Robert's observations about each student he helped, strategies he used to encourage them, and his reflections on the impact of his actions. Robert's mentoring journal, entry 15. Student Maria Rodriguez, dream, to become an environmental scientist. Today's session with Maria was challenging but rewarding. She's struggling with her advanced chemistry class and feeling discouraged. I reminded her of how far she's come, from barely passing science in freshman year to taking advanced classes as a junior. Mentoring strategy. Break down big goals into smaller, manageable steps. We created a study schedule for her chemistry class, focusing on one concept at a time. Reflections. It's not just about financial support. These kids need someone to believe in them, to show them their potential. Maria's eyes lit up when I told her about the local environmental projects she could volunteer for. It's these moments that make all of this worthwhile. Note to self: follow up with Dr. Harris at the university about possible summer internships for Maria. Remember, every small act of kindness and encouragement can change a life. Keep pushing, keep believing in these kids. As Emily and Aliyah pored over the journal entries, they realized they had stumbled upon a goldmine of mentoring wisdom. Robert's insights and strategies could form the backbone of their mentorship program's training curriculum. "Mrs. Thompson," Aliyah said, her eyes shining with excitement, "I think we need to do more than just the mentorship program. What if we used Mr. Thompson's journal and letter to create a guidebook for mentors? We could call it The Robert Thompson Method, a Guide to Transformative Mentoring." Emily nodded enthusiastically. "That's a wonderful idea, Aliyah. And we could use the proceeds from the book to fund more scholarships and expand our program." As they began to plan their new project, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. Robert's legacy was growing beyond anything she could have imagined. His quiet acts of kindness were now inspiring a movement, touching lives far beyond their small town. Emily glanced at Robert's photo on the desk, her heart full of love and pride. "We're just getting started, love," she whispered. "Your dream of a community that looks out for each other. We're making it happen." With renewed energy, Emily and Aliyah set to work, ready to share Robert's wisdom with the world and inspire a new generation of mentors and dreamers. As the weeks passed, Emily and Aliyah's efforts to expand Robert's legacy began to bear fruit. The Robert Thompson Community Mentorship Program was thriving, with dozens of mentors and students actively participating. The publication of The Robert Thompson Method, a Guide to Transformative Mentoring, had exceeded their expectations, selling copies not just locally, but across the state. The impact of their work was becoming increasingly visible in the community. Local businesses were offering more internships and part-time jobs to students. The high school reported improved graduation rates and an increase in college applications. Even the town's atmosphere seemed to have shifted, with people more likely to greet each other on the streets and offer help to neighbors in need. One sunny Saturday morning, Emily stood before a small crowd gathered in the town square. The mayor had just unveiled a plaque dedicating a new community garden in Robert's name. As Emily looked out at the faces of her neighbors, some familiar, some new, she felt a swell of emotion. "Robert always believed in the power of small acts of kindness," she began, her voice strong and clear. "He knew that every gesture, no matter how small, could change a life. This garden is a symbol of that belief, a place where our community can come together, where we can nurture growth not just in plants, but in each other." The crowd applauded warmly, and Emily saw nods of agreement and smiles of appreciation. It was a far cry from the skepticism and criticism that had once surrounded Robert's efforts. As the ceremony concluded, Emily noticed Mr. Thompson hovering at the edge of the crowd. Since his apology, he had become an unexpectedly enthusiastic supporter of their initiatives, often going out of his way to help. She waved him over. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "I wanted to let you know that I've decided to donate a significant portion of my savings to the scholarship fund. It's the least I can do to make up for my past behavior." Emily was momentarily stunned. "Mr. Thompson, that's incredibly generous, thank you." He shook his head. "No, thank you, and Robert. You've shown me what real community leadership looks like. I was wrong about so many things." As Mr. Thompson walked away, Emily felt a sense of awe at how much had changed. Robert's legacy had not only inspired acts of kindness, but had also changed hearts and minds. However, not everyone in town was pleased with the new direction things were taking. Later that week, as Emily was leaving a mentorship meeting at the community center, she overheard two men talking in hushed, angry tones. "This whole Robert Thompson worship has gone too far," one man grumbled. "The town's wasting money on these do-gooder programs when we should be focusing on attracting businesses and lowering taxes." The other man nodded in agreement. "And have you seen how many out-of-towners are moving here now? They say it's because of the community spirit, but they're changing the character of our town." Emily felt a pang of concern. She knew that change, even positive change, could be difficult for some people to accept. It was clear that there was still work to be done in bringing everyone on board with their vision for the community. As she pondered how to address these concerns, her phone buzzed with a text from Aaliyah. "Big news! The State Education Department wants to use our mentorship program as a model for other communities. They're inviting us to present at their annual conference next month." Emily's worry gave way to excitement. This was an opportunity to spread Robert's philosophy even further, to touch even more lives. But it also meant they would be under increased scrutiny. They would need to be prepared to address skepticism and resistance, just as they had done in their own town. As she walked home, Emily's mind raced with plans and ideas. The path ahead would not be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. Robert's legacy was no longer just about one man's kindness. It had become a movement, a way of life that was transforming their community from the inside out. Emily looked up at the clear blue sky, imagining Robert smiling down on them. "We're doing it, love," she whispered. "We're changing the world, one act of kindness at a time." With renewed determination, Emily headed home to call Aaliyah. They had a conference to prepare for, and a message of hope and transformation to share with the world. The day of the state education conference arrived, bringing with it a mix of excitement and nervousness for Emily and Aaliyah. They had spent weeks preparing their presentation, carefully crafting a message that would convey the power of Robert's approach to mentoring and community building. As they set up their materials in the conference room, Emily noticed the diversity of the attendees filing in: educators, administrators, and community leaders from all over the state. The weight of the opportunity before them suddenly felt very real. "Ready?" Aaliyah asked, giving Emily's hand a reassuring squeeze. Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this. For Robert." Their presentation began smoothly, with Emily sharing the story of Robert's secret acts of kindness and how they had transformed their community. Aaliyah followed with data on the impact of their mentorship program, improved graduation rates, increased college enrollments, and a notable drop in juvenile crime rates. The audience seemed engaged, nodding and taking notes. However, as they opened the floor for questions, a man in the back row stood up, his face skeptical. "This all sounds very nice," he said, his tone dismissive. "But how do you justify the costs? Many communities are struggling with budget deficits. How can you argue for spending money on feel-good programs when basic services are underfunded?" Before Emily could respond, another voice cut in. To her surprise, it was Mr. Thompson, who had insisted on coming along to support them. "If I may," Mr. Thompson said, standing up. "I used to think the same way. I was Robert Thompson's biggest critic. But let me tell you something. The return on investment for these programs is phenomenal." He turned to address the whole room. "Since implementing these initiatives, our town has seen a 30% increase in new small business registrations. Crime rates are down, which means less strain on our police force and legal system. Property values are up, because people want to live in a community that cares. This isn't just feel-good spending, it's smart economic policy." A murmur of interest rippled through the room. Emily felt a surge of gratitude towards Mr. Thompson. His transformation from critic to advocate was perhaps the most powerful testament to the impact of Robert's philosophy. As the QA session continued, more challenging questions came up, but Emily, Aaliyah, and Mr. Thompson fielded them with confidence, backing up their answers with data and personal anecdotes. Just as the session was wrapping up, a young man stood up. "I have a confession to make," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm not actually from the education department. I'm a former student of Millbrook High, and I heard about this conference from my old principal." The room fell silent as he continued. "Mr. Thompson, Robert Thompson, helped me when I was about to drop out. He tutored me, encouraged me, even drove me to college visits. I'm now in my final year of medical school." He paused, his eyes glistening. "I just wanted to say thank you. What you're doing, it changes lives. It changed mine." The room erupted in applause. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched the impact of Robert's kindness ripple out even further than she had imagined. As they packed up their materials after the presentation, they were approached by the conference organizer. "That was incredible," she said, beaming. "We've had several requests from other districts wanting to implement similar programs. Would you be willing to conduct some workshops?" Emily looked at Aaliyah, who nodded enthusiastically. "We'd be honored," Emily replied. As they left the conference center, Emily felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had done it. They had shared Robert's vision with the world, and the world was responding. Suddenly, Aaliyah gasped, pointing at her phone. "Mrs. Thompson, look!" Emily peered at the screen, her eyes widening. It was a news alert. State legislature proposes Robert Thompson Act to fund community mentorship programs statewide. Emily felt her knees go weak. Mr. Thompson steadied her, his face beaming with pride. "He did it," Emily whispered. "Robert really did it. He changed the world." As they drove back to their small town, Emily's mind was awhirl with the possibilities ahead. Robert's legacy had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. His simple acts of kindness had sparked a movement that was now poised to transform lives across the entire state. She thought back to the day she had met Aaliyah at Robert's grave, how lost and alone she had felt. Now she was surrounded by a community of people dedicated to carrying forward Robert's vision of compassion and generosity. As they passed the "Welcome to Millbrook" sign, Emily smiled. This town, once divided by skepticism and mistrust, had become a beacon of hope and unity. And it all started with one man who believed in the power of small acts of kindness. "We did it, Robert," Emily whispered, her heart full of love and pride. "We're just getting started, but we're changing the world, one act of kindness at a time." And as the sun set over Millbrook, casting a warm glow over the town Robert had loved so dearly, Emily knew that his legacy would continue to grow, touching lives and transforming communities for generations to come. The loss was still there, but now it was accompanied by a sense of purpose. Robert's legacy of kindness and generosity lived on, and she was determined to ensure it continued to make a difference in the lives of young people like Aaliyah. In the days following her meeting with Aaliyah, Emily found herself reflecting on moments from her life with Robert that now took on new meaning.